We're so glad you're here in the rain. It's one of the most beautiful sounds in the background. Everybody start to take your seats.
Thank you. I've been sitting for 3 days, so I'm going to stand.
Unbelievable. I want to just, everybody, can you please take your seats, and can we have silence to begin our next and much anticipated speaker, Ben Okri, who has come. Woo!
Thank you.
Ben Okri, who has come a great distance. I think you should dive in however you want. At some point, we might want to know about the journey, the physical and spiritual journey you have taken to reach us here at Unfinished, which is a wonderful conference that manages to unite head and heart. In the last few days, we've spoken about AI, about history, trauma, mental health, what gets transmitted through generations. We've talked about play and the importance of early childhood, ages 0 through 5. We've had different men talk about their own experiences with therapy and addressing some of the challenges they've faced. We've talked to people here in civic organizations eager to improve the society in which they live, and we're thrilled to have you here to read some of your work and to talk to us about your own praxis. Thank you, Ben Okri.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here, especially given the journey I've made. In fact, the journey I've made has made it even more of a pleasure to be here. I'd like to read a couple of things and be in conversation, and I wrote something special for you for this event.
Great.
I hope you'll have the patience to hear it out.
We're with you.
But yeah, I'm here. I'm here. The first poem I'm going to read is called "Finding the Present." The present moment began with fire, and still it burns. It began with water, and still they drown on the margins of Europe. It began with air. See how they flee, see how the bombs fall on houses made of sand, dreams made of flesh. The blind drones of remote war. But it began with earth, where all destinies are one, but many perish for want of justice, or soap, or flowers, instead of fears. Our age is confused. The world runs ahead while humanity falls behind, trampled on by the juggernauts whose names are the fearsome powers. Across borders and nations, the new web of chains within the greatest horizon the world has ever known. Water itself resists oppression. Press her down too much and she geezes up with unexpected force somewhere else. We are all on a great ship that has lost its balance, lost its way. And a huge storm is gathering beyond the iron veil of our hearts. Maybe it's a storm of revelation, maybe it's a storm of truth, of which art is the unknown magus. The age is changing. The present moment is itself constantly revealing. Everything we see is a mask of time, concealing its features. Come with me through the mask into the rights of vision and truth. Come with me into the blue garden. New time is being made here from the wandering sleep of dreamers. Shadows on the city walls come and go. Shadows on the cave walls walk to and fro. Shadows in the garden, shadows in the garden, shadows in the shadows.
Thank you.
That's the first poem.
Woo!
Another one, or should we talk for a bit?
Up to you.
What do you want?
Another poem.
One more poem? Okay. This poem is called Revolution. And revolutions are very hard to find, just like me trying to find it in this book. Maybe it's my eyes. Can you find it for me?
Yeah, no problem. I have progressive lenses.
This poem that I wrote is called Revolution. I was walking through the streets and I kept seeing things.
See, we're a great team.
Thank you. You got
Thank
great
you.
eyes. Revolution. They live as if everything is settled in the world. But nothing is settled. Not our dreams, nor our fears, nor the boundaries between things. The land isn't settled, nor the realm of sleep, nor the deep mines where our fathers weep, nor the deep wells where our mothers call out our names. These walls of steel never kept out the eyes of hunger that wander the world like thunder. Those stony eyes that devour the poor with a cold gaze. Those tower blocks. Those men who live on dust and sleep on stones. Those mothers with their teeth falling out from mercury in their food. Those children whose lungs will not carry them through life. What do they know of boundaries? What do they know of the gods of the streets or the gods of hunger? Nothing is settled. Not our place in the world, nor our place among the dead. The rich have not locked up all the dreams or the power that grows in rage. Generations live on dust and debris and are pale as ghosts. But the god of hunger powers their bodies with the secret electricity that drives the galaxies. On the edge of cities they swell and they grow. Their only education is a text of truth, which the world delivers without humor. Nothing is settled. Those who think they will inherit the earth because they have mortgaged the sun will find on the eve of their usurpation that the grim horsemen are on the horizon. The earth shifts and howls. The sands have turned into people. The graves speak lucid prophecies. Nothing is settled because there is nothing to inherit except thunder after sleep. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Ben, thank you. I see you're someone who, in order to land, goes straight to the text. I think so. Thank you for the poems. We'll
Thank you.
read more. You'll read more later. Let's just take a minute to land. You've just landed, more or less. You took the train from London. Could you tell us a little bit about that journey and what it was like and why you choose this form of travel?
Well, I want you to understand that it's not because I am afraid of flying. Everyone I tell this to think I'm afraid of flying. I'm not afraid of flying. I just don't like it very much. And I also think it's an inefficient way to sort of live with our planet. And also, if I'm honest with you, I kind of love trains. And I like slow arrivals. I think in our world, everything is too fast. Everything is encouraged to be too fast. We date too fast. We fall in love too fast. We fall out of love too fast. We write too fast, think too fast, dream too fast, eat too fast, die too fast, grow too fast. You know, I think there's a place for slowness. I think there's a place for the paradox of the speed of the tortoise, as we say in certain African proverbs. I love trains, and I wanted to come to Unfinished by train. I didn't know it was going to be such an epic journey. I've been through 5 cities, 6 altogether. It's taken me 3 nights because there were cancellations all over Germany. I didn't know that Germans had such a relationship with cancellations. I never saw more trains cancelled in all my life than I have in Germany. One had to skirt round the floods. You know, I was told that the floods in certain parts of Vienna, in certain parts of this part of the world, happens once every 1,000 years. I never heard of such a thing in my life. It's almost like Noah's flood, you know. Once every 1,000 years, and it chooses when I'm going to come visit you to happen. So we had to spend most of our time kind of avoiding this flood, which happens once every 1,000 years, but it's happening now more regularly. So something is going on there that is more than a millennial cycle. I've seen many things on this travel. I think traveling by train is one of the best ways to get to know people. If I'd flown in, I would have just got in at Heathrow, gone through immigration, got on a plane, eaten some lousy plane food, flown for 3 or 4 hours, landed at the airport here, and come straight here. I would have learned nothing about what's going on the ground in Brussels, in Germany, in Austria, in Hungary, and now in Budapest. There's something about traveling by train which is like walking. You're in touch with the landscape. You're in touch with the way in which people live. I have seen people in various parts of all my journeys. I've seen them in every single city. In my essay, I've seen them scrabbling from dustbins. I've seen people sleeping in streets. Every single city I've been in. I've seen people are going out of their minds. They're mad. I've seen people who are cold and unfriendly. I've seen people who are wonderful and warm. I have experienced something of the story of this part of the world just by traveling through it by train. So I wouldn't change it, even though it's been so long and so awkward.
London, Brussels, Frankfurt, Wels, Linz, Vienna, Budapest, Arad, Bucharest.
That sounds like a poem you just read.
That is a poem. Your travels are a poem, which Capucine sent me. If you travel only by train, I agree that it is a beautiful, slow way to travel. And we talk about, in France where I live, there's kind of 2-speed Europe. There's the Europe on the fast train, and then the Europe on the slower trains. And some people feel more left behind, and others are... It's a real divide in the world today.
Absolutely. And I've been on both trains. On the fast trains, there's restaurants, there's food, and people are reading books, and people are sleeping and talking and not talking. On the slow trains, there's no food. Sometimes the light is poor. The people are friendly. People look at you in the eye. People help you if you've left your luggage behind. There's almost like a different ethos to the fast and slow trains. The slow trains are very annoying because when they stop in the middle of nowhere for an hour, there's nothing quite like, who is this wonderful child?
We have a great multi-generational audience.
That was a fast child.
Yeah. Does this mean if you only travel now by train, it means you can only travel to places reachable from London by train?
Yeah, pretty much. Or boat.
Boats, okay.
The last time I went to America, I went by boat. It took me 5 days.
That's great.
Or camel.
Where'd you take the camel?
That's in Egypt, if you're traveling around Egypt.
Right, okay. You have engaged very directly in your poetry and in your work with the climate crisis, with the world that we're living in some of your essays or fiction. In Tiger Work, you write some stories from the perspective of the future looking back on the past being today's present. Tell us a little bit about that choice of looking back on today from the future and why and what you want to do in engaging with this question so directly.
I think I'm going to read you an essay that I wrote specially for you in a minute. So this is like a prelude to that.
Great.
It's very difficult to write about the climate crisis because it usually has only one of two endings. It's a very limited palette of fiction. Either everyone dies or everyone lives. That's it. There's no in between. And I wanted to find a way to write about the climate crisis in a way that looks at it just slightly differently. So instead of writing about something we're moving towards, which is what we tend to do, I wanted to write about something that we're looking back on. Because to look back on ourselves is a very, very powerful perspective. I am fascinated by the act of looking and the act of seeing. And in these stories, I wanted to just turn the lens from thousands and thousands of years in the future and to look back. Because the curious thing about being human, about us, human beings, is that we're not very good at looking at what's right in front of us. We're not very good at looking at the present moment, at looking at here and now. We're okay at looking at the past a little bit. We argue about it. But looking at the present is very, very, very difficult. And it's because looking at the present is kind of linked with trauma, and linked with avoidance, and linked with fear, and linked with many of our psychological and psychic problems that we have. So to look directly, to look clearly, to look at, in a way, is when done at its deepest level, is an act of healing. Because you can't see or begin to see without trying to move towards some kind of wholeness.
Would you like to read the essay and then we can talk further?
It's a little essay I wrote on one of the trains.
One of the slow trains.
In fact, it was written on a slow and on a fast train. I'll read some of it because it's a fairly comprehensive essay. It's just simply called Praxis. If you could play really gently, because I want folks to hear and not hear. Some say that the world is unfinished, so that with thought and action, we will finish it. But more truthfully, we are unfinished. We are the continual work in progress. The trouble is when we lose a sense of our being unfinished. Then we merely live from day to day, accepting the world as it is, accepting ourselves as we are. But the world is a reflection of the degree of our unfinishedness. The world, with its injustices, with its oppression, with its persistence of the power of that which has been to continually tyrannize us, that world is. The truth is that if we don't see the world as it is, we will not see that it is drastically and catastrophically unfinished. And if we don't see the world as it can be, we will accept the way it is as nothing but fate, which cannot be changed. But we have to see the world as it is first. It also perhaps it means understanding how the world came to be as it is. This understanding can be historical or ideological. None of these procedures is innocent. Ideological understanding bases its understanding on certain ideas that the individual or group take as given. It may be correct or it may not. It may be partially correct. There may be unknown factors. Even a historical understanding is partial. This seeing clearly I talk about is vital. Too many of us see partially and proceed to act on that partial seeing. And our actions not only fail but have disastrous consequences. We have to see the world clearly first. It is the job of the best poets. Rainer Maria Rilke used to train himself in the art of seeing by going to the zoo to look at animals. He used to watch animals walk up and down in the zoo, and he spent hours just looking. And he learned this art from Cézanne, who used to go to landscapes and just look, and trained himself to paint exactly what he was seeing. We have to see the world clearly first. We have to see ourselves truly. We have to have a sense of how the world can be. How the world can be does not only belong to the world of vision, it belongs to our inextricable sense of justice. In order to have a right praxis, often we need to understand and deal with trauma, with historical trauma, with spiritual trauma. History does not understand trauma, and ideology has no place for it. Trauma is a long, cracked sleep of the spirit of a people. It is the smash of the psyche when the world does not compute with the world that we feel. No one talks enough about historical healing. A people go through a long period of a cultural and spiritual smash, and all the pieces of the world are broken and no longer fit together how it used to. Our buildings take the form of our secret wounds. Our forgotten empires, our castles, the long history of grandeur that was also a long history of injustice, lurks among the wounds of our landscape. Our faces hold the topography of this unseen, unspoken, undocumented trauma. This trauma is historical, but it is also the ongoing story of humanity. Right now, it is a story of the dying earth. Sometimes several traumas, a symphony of traumas, are playing out in our lives. We have to see it right. We have to see it right. We have to see it bravely. We have to see it from the consciousness of transcendence. For consciousness is something which, of its own nature, transcends. We have to see clearly that a human being is more than flesh and blood. We have to see that, as Shakespeare said somewhere, we are fearfully made. We are homo faber, human beings, the makers. We create the society in which we live. We make our world. There can be no effective praxis without this clear seeing at its core. For over 100 years, we've been engaged in this vast enterprise of capitalism and the creation of modern society. But we've also been engaged in the greatest exploitation and devastation of the earth and its environment that has ever happened in human history. While we thought we were creating a new world or power and capital and success, we were in fact engaged in the single greatest act of collective suicide through the progressive making of our world unsustainable. A praxis that does not include the environment is one that is avoiding the most important issue of our times. Sooner or later, we're going to have to face it. But praxis cannot have despair at its core. For me, this environmental crisis is really the greatest crisis humanity has faced, and it provides us with our greatest opportunity. It gives us a chance to redream what it means to be human. We are now being forced to ask ourselves whether we're part of one another or not. We are being compelled to a new unity. We're being forced to reconsider the nature of cause and effects. We have to look harder at the causes. And we have to learn to engender better causes to create more magnificent effects for humanity. Which way will we go? Whatever we choose, we have to live out that truth. The depth of our praxis has to match the scale of the challenge, which is really, finally, all of human life at the present moment. We have never had so great a moment in which to begin to rise to the greatness of what it means to be human. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
I think you should take slow trains more often. That was really beautiful and powerful. Thank you for those words.
Thank you.
This is an optimistic message, even in a pessimistic moment. For you, is optimism or hope, is it a character trait or is it a practice? Is it something that you work on daily in terms of how you approach the world?
I think it's easier to be pessimistic than optimistic. I think pessimism comes more naturally to the human spirit. I think the way we're wired, if we're given a negative fact and a positive fact, we'll be more scared by the negative fact than we'll be drawn to the positive fact. It's the way we're wired. Politicians always use that trick. They tell you what you're most afraid of to force you to vote. If they tell you what you most want, or what's most best about you, well, you might not be so interested. We're more drawn by fear than hope. So for me, the job of the poet is to find a new way to give hope, a new dynamism. For me, being positive and optimistic is an act of will and an act of vision. It is something for me that is renewed every day. And I think maybe that's the way it's meant to be. Maybe that's part of the secret meaning of being unfinished.
But it's clear that this comes from a place not just of imagination, but of hard work. I mean, there's effort, mental effort and emotional effort that goes into this text that you've read for us.
Well, being an artist is hard work. I mean, isn't that right?
Yes, that's why you do it. Right?
I've met a few prime ministers in my time, and when I meet them, I tell them, my work is harder than yours.
It's true. It's true.
And they say, really? I've got to govern this whole nation. I say, well, I've got to tell one truth. One truth. Well, in a way that it lasts for 100 years.
Yeah. I think politicians have fewer tools than they used to because it's hard to promise a better future now.
Well, it's easier to promise it, but hard to do it.
It's true, yeah.
And more than being hard to do it, so few of them really try anyway.
That's also the case. We've talked a little bit earlier today about the future and kids. 25% of the world population is under 15. In 2025, 2/5 of the world will be born in Africa, and 75% of children think the future is frightening. We learned that in a panel that our colleague Bethany presented today. Thoughts?
You know, when I was growing up, there was a Cold War that was behind us. It had just gone, but it arrived in Nigeria a bit late. The specter of the atomic bomb and of nuclear weapons. You know, there's, in a sense, for the last 100 years, there's been stuff in human history that's frightened us. You know, a whole generation has just come through the COVID disaster. Things to be afraid of has always been part of humanity. There's very rarely been a time when we've had tremendous amount to hope for or to look forward to. And when we've had those times, they've usually been very brief. So I'm not bothered by those statistics. What I'm bothered about is what we're going to do about it. And this is what brings me to education. I personally think we need a new kind of education for our children. We need a more practical education. We need a more visionary education. We need a more creative education. In England at the moment, they've outlawed poetry from the curriculum. You can't. It's possible you can't do art anymore. Music has been removed from the curriculum. So in a way, culture is slowly losing its place in the foreground of the consciousness of our children. But we need culture as much as we need science and technology. We need the creative, because what culture does, what the creative does for children, is it gives them the very tools of hope itself. If you teach a child how to build something, you're beginning to teach them how to build the world. If you teach a child how to play music, or how to sing, or how to dance, or how to write poetry, you're giving them the tools for being able to reimagine the world. We need science and we need technology, but we need those deep skills of reimagining. Because the world, you know, there's only two ways we deal with this world. We either accept it for what it is, or we say what it is what it is, and I can reimagine that. And we have to give that capacity to reimagine to our children, because that's where the hope comes from. Hope is not an empty, vague phrase. Hope is a practical, physical thing. When people know that they can make, they know that they can shape. The two things are deeply connected. So I think we need a new radical education. And we need to also teach our children how to see the frightening facts. Facts can be frightening, but facts in themselves are not more powerful than we are. This is where culture is so important. We need to remind our children of the fundamental transcendence of being human. That whatever the problems we have created, because we have created these problems, it means that we are automatically greater than these problems. That needs to be impacted into education. And you can only do that through art. It's art of making, the art of dreaming, and the rigorous art of seeing clearly. I teach my daughter how to look at what's in front of her. I tell her to stand in front of something, and I say, look at it. What do you see? How many elements do you see? And each day she gets to see more and more elements just by looking at the same thing and at the same place. The more we see clearly, the easier it is for us to see that actually the problems of this world are actually in themselves illusions that we can dream and work our way around. I believe this fundamentally.
Great.
Thank you.
It's you as a poet. You studied science and you turned to poetry. Was that an important shift for you? What was it like to discover poetry and to find that was the form that you wanted to use to express yourself? You're also a novelist too, but poetic novels.
Well, Rachel, it's easier to go from science to poetry than from poetry to science. Because science, I was going to be a physicist, I was going to be an inventor. Science gives you this extraordinary set of tools. And for me, the greatest of those tools is the tool of rigorous, logical, sequential thought. You won't believe it, but we don't teach our children logic. Isn't that crazy? We teach them all kinds of things, but we don't teach them logic. This follows that, follows this, follows that. Rigorous logic. And that's what science gives you. To ask a question without deviating from the essential question. To concentrate on the core set of linkages between causes and their effects. Also a great interest in the material world. But you know, one day I was going to university, I was going to study, I turned up for my interview. I was 14 years old in Nigeria, and all the professors looked at me and they asked me, they said, "How old are you?" I said, 14. They said, "You really should be going home to your mother's milk," they said to me. So I went home to mom's milk and my dad's books. My dad had a great set of books he brought from England. I began to read his books, and I read my way from science into poetry. And poetry was the beginning of the harvest of what science taught me, which is that poetry is not about the flight of the imagination. It's about seeing the world and seeing the links and the possibilities between things, the connections between unlikely things, the way in which the story of life and the story of the magic of life and the magic of possibility is woven in dust and stars and rivers and trees, computers, railway stations, and huts, dogs, dolphins, roses, clouds. Kind of logical magic links all of these things. And so poetry for me was the beginning of the transcendence of science.
We've all benefited from your finding your way to poetry. I think at this point we can open up this conversation to the great collective intelligence and intellectual curiosity of this group. If we could spend about 10 minutes or so with any questions for Ben Okri, and then perhaps you might conclude with one more poem.
Thank you. Yes, that'd be lovely. Yes, please.
Does anyone have a question?
All right. Okay. There's someone there, but you can. It's good exercise.
We'll get to you.
Okay, so thank you so much for coming here and for reciting your poetry. And thank you so much for the fact that you didn't sit down, but walked around and had an extra connection to us through your body language, your rhetoric, and all the things that you made feel that you are a human being like we are, and we could all be poets, but just having a look at the reality around us, traumatic or beautiful, doesn't matter. So we should be able and open to everything around us, and that is one thing which you conveyed to us in a beautiful manner. So I think that I'm speaking in the name of all the audience. It is a really enriching event and performance. And another thing which I'd like to say, that what you read, the first poem, is extremely daring, I should say. Not only that you have written it, but that you read it to us in a time where poets are no longer very daring as I used to know them in earlier times. I myself am a member of a beat poetry club or group, and I must say that they are not as daring as you are and as they should be, because beat poetry is known as revolutionary and so on. But you are a real example of a beat poet with a rhythm of the way you talk, of the way you recite, and also movement and all the intercourse with the audience. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Another question. We had some question there. We'll get to you. Yeah, first here and then thanks. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Alex.
Hello.
Congratulations. I'm really happy for today, the whole day. I liked the comment before because it somehow connects my idea. I've seen the excitement, the hurtfulness which you feel when you write probably. And I remembered the word radical which you used before. And I feel that somehow it's an end to the recommendations of your poems. Be more radical towards the change. Towards in the morning, Mr. Jones, as I remember, had some poems also, and they were with the same direction of healing the world, of coming together to the greater good, but they were a lot directioned into love and feeling and healing, if you want. So my question is, appreciating your style and your goal, do you find that it's easier to go and heal on a long term or extirpate on a short term for the greater good as a healing of this big situation of the planet?
Last part, you mean, is it easier to heal on the long term or to what in the short term? That was an interesting word you used.
Healing on the long term?
Yes.
Or extirpation on the short term? Because I feel your anger and your radical point of view as a call to arms, which I appreciate in a historical view and as a comment of my former colleague.
You know, I've only read you a very small selection of my poems. I write many different kinds of poems. I don't want to get into that. Long term or short, I keep saying, as I say, wherever I go, wherever I speak about the place of poets in these contemporary, these difficult times, and the role of activism in these times, I always say it's best to think of it as an orchestra. You know, some people are oboes, some people are violins, some people are drums, some people are saxophones. You know, some people shout to wake people up, some people speak gently to move them, some people speak in riddles to perplex them. Some are enigmatic to stun them. You know, it's take your place in the orchestra, but be in the orchestra of change and possibility. That's all. That's for me. That's the key thing. We all have to be in the orchestra of change in one way or another. Some of us just brush, you know, against an almost silent instrument. You don't hear it, it's like the wind, but it adds something. You know, some people protest quietly. You know, I just think that we're in a moment. And I believe in the strange mystery of the fact that we're all of us alive at this particular point in history. You know, I don't think it's an accident. And I think that fact that we're alive now, this moment, when the world is tipping towards the unthinkable, the fact that we're all alive now means something. It's telling us something. It means that we are all called upon in one way or another to help, to turn the ship around, one way or another. That's it. You know, I write poems about so many things, but you know, when I began to discover, actually, if I'm honest with you, it was when we gave birth, when my daughter was born 8 years ago. That really did something to my head. It took me as you can see, I'm a slow traveler. It took me a long time to have my first kid. It did. And when she turned up, it was like an amazing cataclysm. It just totally destroyed my old head and my old brain. It just shook everything up. And I just began to see the world very differently. She was 3 years old. No one had told her about climate change or anything like that. We live along a canal. She was 3 years old, and she would take a stick, and she would start to pluck out the plastic from the canal. And I would say, but why are you doing that? And she says, but it's killing this little river, she said. You know, and that did something to me. And I began to look into the facts, and the minute I saw the facts, I couldn't go back, you know. So I still try and play my left-handed music. So I think you do both. You hit the present and you speak for the long term. I don't know how much long term we've got, actually, when you talk of long-term healing. I don't know how much long term we've got. You know? So thank you very much for your question. Thank you.
We had a question down here on the top row. The gentleman in the top. No, ma'am, down here on the top row.
So I'm aware that I've not been very fair to this side of the room.
Hello. My name is Emmanuel.
Hello, Emmanuel.
First of all, I want to say thank you very much for coming here, blessing us with your presence. I'm Nigerian myself, so when I was trying to register for the conference and I saw that you were coming, it was the last straw that broke the camel's back for me. As a Nigerian, I also know that there's no train from London to Nigeria. So I was wondering how you make that trip, because you said you go everywhere by trains. Then my second question is a kind of personal question. If you see the title of Taylor Swift's last album, it's called The Tortured Poet, something like that. And I was wondering how you deal, when you're in that state of writer's block, if you ever experience writer's block, you're tortured like that, and how you get yourself out of that. Because you have a ton of books, 10, 12, I don't know how many, but a lot of them. So how you're able to get yourself out of writer's block to achieve, to write those things. And then the third question is more like, too much?
3 questions, I like that.
Okay, I'll keep it short, 7. Okay, the last question is the role of your poetry in the African, specifically in the Nigerian civic society. I mean, we have a lot of political, civic problems, and I wonder what you think poetry, what role poetry can play to get us out of the mess we are in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, and Nigeria in particular. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your 3,000 questions. How do I get to Nigeria if I don't fly? Well, you know, at this moment, we're working on a very beautiful, complex route by which to get to Nigeria without getting on an aeroplane. So the next time I come back here, we'll talk about that journey. Yeah? Your second question, you use the word writer's block. I honestly do not know what you mean by that. I know the words, but I don't know what you mean by that. In my dictionary, it just doesn't exist. I've looked for it on the writer. I've looked on the block. I've spelled block B-L-O-C. I've spelled block B-O-L-C-K. I've spelled it B-O-L-K. I can't find it. I don't know. I think if you're busy, why would you have a block? There's just so much to do on this planet as a writer. There's just so much to do. There's just so much. Everywhere I look, there's something that wounds my eyes and wounds my spirit. Everywhere I look, everything I touch, everyone I meet. You know, I was in a concourse at Brussels, and this man came into my pocket and slowly lifted my wallet out of it. And I turned and I just actually looked at him. I looked at him and I looked at the wallet and I said, well, what are you going to do? And he said, do you want it? I says, well, it would be nice. And he gave it to me, and I've been thinking about that. You know, and then on the way on one of the slow trains, I wrote a short poem about that, you know. Did he want to steal my wallet, or did he want to give it to me? You know? So when people tell me that they have writer's blocks, I say, what hurts you? That's my first question. I don't tell them, oh, do this and do that. This is a good cure. I just say, man, what hurts you? What hurts you in this world? What wounds you? What's scratching away at your spirit? And the minute I say that, they're not there anymore. They've gone. They've gone. I don't say, what do you love, by the way. I don't say, hey, man, what is it you love? What do you love, man? I don't say that because it doesn't really do the trick for some reason. It's not for nothing that Yeats, the great Irish poet Yeats, talked about being hurt into poetry. And this is a man who wrote some of the greatest love poems ever. But he talked about poetry as being hurt into poetry. So I don't understand that question because I don't have enough hands to deal with the things that hurt me and the things that I love. And the people I want to say, just give me back my wallet, please. And as for your final question, poetry in Nigeria, what is the role? Many of my poems are about the injustices and the inequalities and the ills of Nigeria. If you look at an early volume of mine called An African Elegy, you know, I don't know what poetry can do to change a society. I don't think poetry can immediately do that. I don't think anything can immediately do that. There was a time when people believed that revolution can change society. Well, in some cases, the change was pretty terrible, right? So I don't know. All I know is that poetry wakes up the spirit. Poetry wakes up something in us that connects us to the possibility of life. Poetry angers us into truth. Poetry caresses us into being in love with the simplest and the smallest and the most invisible things. Poetry expands what it means to be human, expands our souls, our senses, our capacity for distinctions between fragrances. Poetry makes us children again, which means it makes us big again. Makes us small, makes us big, makes us vast, makes us responsive. And any revolution without poetry is never going to work. And maybe all the revolutions that have failed in the past is because they did not have poetry at their heart. You know? Whatever revolution we want to bring about, poetry has got to be at the heart of it, because poetry is what connects us to the vast thoroughfare of being human. You know, with poetry in the heart, you don't walk down the street and make distinctions between people. You know? I don't know many racist poets. You know? I'm sure there are some of them. I don't think we read them. I don't think we quote them 1,000 years down the line. You know? So poetry changes society very slowly. Sometimes a poem falls into the hands of the person who can make the most difference in enacting laws. Poetry works in mysterious ways. But I think don't put the responsibility for the change of society on poets. That's not their job. Their job is to tell us the truth, so that we can change the world with it beautifully for everybody.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Maybe we'll take.
Thank you very much for your question.
We'll take. Maybe should we take one more question and then you'll read a poem to send us on our way?
Thank you. I better be looking up this poem then.
Hello. Hello. And thank you. Here. Up
There
here.
you are.
Okay. So you mentioned ideology as drawback, as a blocker in noticing and healing trauma. My question to you is whether you feel you are ideological sometimes, and what's your practice to notice that and to correct course? What are some methods that you use?
You know, I wasn't trying to knock ideology. Please don't get me wrong. Ideology can have tremendous benefits. Theory can have tremendous benefits in helping us to understand the structure of society and what we can do about it. It has a very powerful role. I just think that it is that on its own is a limited lens. If all you have is ideology, you might end up killing 1 million people because of it. That's the problem with ideology. If ideology is the only lens you have, you know, we believe that society must be made equal, so we have to chop everybody's head so that everyone is at the same height. That's what ideology would do. You would say everyone's got to be equal, so we'll chop everybody's head so it's the same height. That's a limited lens. That's a very limited lens. That's why I said earlier, you know, a revolution without poetry at the heart of it is doomed. Ideology has to have poetry at the heart of it. Because with poetry at the heart of ideology, when you say everyone should be equal, you're not looking at people's heads. You're looking at people's hearts, their spirit, their capacities, their talents, their gifts, their contributions. You're looking at a whole range of stuff. And then when you look at all of this whole range of stuff, you actually realize that how do you bring about a perfect equality with all of this range of stuff? It's impossible to do. The one thing you can do in law is to prevent one set of people from being disadvantaged because of what they are. Whether it's because they've got one eye, because they're women, because they're black, because they're white. It's happening now too. Because they've got black hair, because they've got beards. Whatever it is, you know, if we enshrine the fact that nobody should be disadvantaged or oppressed for one reason or another, we're on some kind of a track, so that we're not trying to equalize everybody in height, we're trying to free everybody. It really is about liberation at the end of the day. So my answer to your question is poetry is my praxis. And not just poetry in terms of what you write on the page. I've always said this. Poetry is not just what's on the page. Poetry is a way of looking at life. Poetry is a tangential way of being with life. It's a stance. It's a dance. It's a fluidity of mind. It's a non-judgmental, clear-seeing, clear-touching, boundaryless way of seeing the world. Poetry complicates everything. You know, it complicates everything. When you give me somebody with certainty, an absolute certainty, and I drop one poem into their spirit, their certainty goes to pieces. That's what poetry does. It's supposed to screw up your certainties, you know, and return us to vulnerability, to dialogue. You can't have a dialogue with certainties. If I'm totally certain about what I feel and what I think, and you're totally certain about what you feel and what you think, we can't have a conversation. We can only have a conversation from our uncertainties, our unfinishedness, our vulnerabilities. And that's what poetry does. Poetry blurs. Poetry says, you think this? Look at that. And, you know, so ideology has its limitations precisely because it insists on seeing the world in a certain way. And insists on a certain way of achieving its ends. That is its limitation. That's its greatness, but that's also its limitation. I wish Marx had been a poet as well.
Thank you.
I was thinking of the last poem I should read to you. And you know, as so many of the poems, I thought, you know, let's end with a love poem, shall we? Actually, I'm going to end with 2 love poems. The first one is called Based on the Translation. I wander to the house of the one I love, where the plum tree brushes the eaves, dripping with blossom and with leaves. The dew lies in the white flowers, lies there in the gentle hours. I watch sparrows from the flower cups drink. Singing of my love makes me think. How do you go to your love's house? On the night wind with wings. Who calls you to your lover's house? Everything that sings. How many roads lead to your lover's house? More roads than sand. Which is the best road to your lover's house? All the roads in the land. And the final one is called Lines Towards a Love Poem. But just lines I used to send this lady who became my lady. A voice in the flower. And I am missing you. On the edge of anguish. Hey, light thrower, I'm throwing love your way. Pure form and luminous spirit. Beyond the body, you distill pleasures. Kissing you stops time and the mind. I carry you in me like a poem unread, like a classic song, or that full moon. I'm craving your gaze, just a long kiss without breathing. So be patient. Let love and time do their mysterious work. I woke with a new clarity. We earn what life will give us. Earn it with courage, love, and wisdom. I'm sending you my tears to open your way. Sow your talent. Reap your genius. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Ben Okri, thank you. Thank you for your words. Thank you for your poetry. Thank you for your humanism. And thank you for making the long journey to come here to Unfinished today.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you.